Hi, everyone. If you are actually watching us live, welcome. I know many of you will just be seeing this via recording, but if you're watching us now, I want you to know that we are happy for that. I'm here. I'm Betsy Sobiak with Tiara International. We are a company that specializes in women's leadership development in a lot of ways from the inside out, and I'm very honored to be talking today with Nilima Bhat, who is the co-author of a new book coming out right now called Shakti Leadership, Embracing the Masculine and Feminine Powers in Business. Did I get that right that time?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, good. So thank you so much for joining me. And this will be a pretty informal conversation, but I just wanted to capture a few of your thoughts on the book, on Shakti Leadership, on your journey, so that we have them as we share about your book tour that's coming up in the US in a couple of weeks. So I'd love for you to start just by sharing with us what Shakti Leadership is to you and why this book really came to be at this time.
Well, thanks, Betsy. Lovely chatting with you. And a quick primer on Shakti and therefore Shakti in leadership. As you know, there is the conscious capitalism movement that is become very popular, and rightly so. It's about bringing a higher purpose to business, reforming business, having conscious cultures, having conscious leaders, and having a kind of win-win stakeholder integration that everyone wins when they're involved with a business. The key element or tenet of the four would be conscious leadership, because everything begins with leadership of that business. When we were looking at a model for conscious leadership that would be easy to share and that would be global, that would go across cultures, Raj and I have been talking about that for a while. Raj, my co-author, who's the co-founder of Conscious Capitalism. And I realized if we're talking about leadership at a different level, which is more conscious, then you need a different power base. Because all leadership is essentially an exercise of power to get impact and desired outcomes. If you don't have the power to impact, you're not going to do leadership, right? So traditional leadership has been based very much on a force model, on a dominator model, a win at all cost model, a very masculine model actually. And that is in no way looking down on it. It's been the best serving so far, and it's done well. It's achieved results. And yet, if we're talking about becoming more conscious as leaders, then we can't be operating from ego-based win-lose power games. We also need a conscious source of power. And that conscious source of power really comes from the tradition of yoga, which is called Shakti. Shakti is essentially the power of your presence. When you're not in your ego, you are in your presence. You are in a state which says, I have nothing to defend. I have nothing to promote. I have nothing to fear. I'm here now. And I'm in the moment, ready to fully show up for this moment. That's presence. And a conscious leader is present. But it's not a still inactive state. It's a profoundly creative, active space where you are actually tapping into a kind of, well, that's what Star Wars calls the Force.
Mm-hmm.
There is a power and an energy to your presence when you've stepped back from your ego. And this power is what is called Shakti. And this Shakti is effectively you tapping into the creative, regenerative, infinite energy of the cosmos that runs you. So it fuels creation, it animates consciousness, and most importantly, it drives change. Now, as leaders, all of us are looking to drive change. But if you don't have the power base to drive change, then it's like stirring water in a cup. You think you're very busy, but nothing's really getting done. So that briefly would be Shakti leadership. It's in a way a complement to the idea of conscious leadership. I can be conscious and self-aware as a leader, but I also need the power of that consciousness, which is Shakti, in order to lead the change I want.
Yes, I'm struck by how many times you use the word power as you were talking about Shakti leadership. And I feel like that word is sometimes controversial, particularly when we deal with women in leadership. On one hand, people do want to be leaders. They want to be able to move people toward change. Yet we often run into people who resist the word power or don't want to be powerful. Can you talk a little bit more about the word power and why it's such a loaded word and what the vision of power is for Shakti leadership?
It's a lovely question, Betsy. You're so right, because traditional definitions and experience of power in the very patriarchal culture that has been around on the globe for a long time is a very power over power, right? Where I have to dominate you, I have got to put my force over you, or I have to steal some of yours in order for me to feel bigger and better and okay, right? That is a traditional experience of power, and that's why it's called power plays and power games, and it's horrible. It makes woman's flesh crawl, and that's why we lean back when we are at a table full of very dominant, you know, masculine energy that's out of control. We don't want to be part of that. That's why Sheryl Sandberg says, "Come on, ladies, lean in." Okay, so she's kind of getting at that same thing. Not engaging with the power dynamics at work, they just carry on and become worse, actually. So, Shakti is power that is not based on your privilege, your rank, your position. It is an infinite source that is here for everyone. And when we engage with that, the power in me knows it is infinite. I know I have access to enough. And when I work with you, I know that the power you have is the same source. It's coming from that same place. You to have enough where it's coming from. And now suddenly we are engaging in a power with rather than a power over dance. Okay, it's a power with, and it's a dance, and it's beautifully energizing. It's in the Indian tradition, when we tap into Shakti, we experience what they call rasa, which is the juice that vitalizes and animates and lifts everything up and makes it all fecund and auspicious and beautiful. It's power, but power of a very beautiful kind, power that holds and regenerates, rather than power that dominates and controls and destroys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very inspiring, I think, to the give and take of it, the honoring another person's power while really feeling your own power.
Yes.
I think is a really beautiful vision for how it can work, as opposed to it being a more competitive win-lose type of model.
Yes.
And I also, so for me, I associate the word Shakti with feminine energy or feminine leadership. And in your title of your book, and I know the work that you do, and even in co-writing this book with Raj, that you really stand for embracing both feminine and masculine power in business. So can you talk about that? Like how do you see Shakti leadership really embracing and integrating both the masculine and the feminine, being appealing to both men and women who really want to grow as leaders?
Sure. So just, I think the West has known the idea of yin and yang, which comes from the Chinese system, for a long time, right? That there is a primal duality in all of creation, from the smallest unit to the biggest. And it is yin, the masculine aspect, and yang, yin is the feminine, yang is the masculine, right? And it's the creative tension between the two that generates force, that generates life, okay, the life force. In the Indian yogic tradition, we have a similar but slightly different idea of that primal duality. It is Shiva who represents the ultimate still awareness, just pure beingness. Okay. But in order for that being to create, it needs to have its feminine aspect, which is Shakti. And so Shakti emerges as the creative force or power out of the being of Shiva, the pure everything, non-dual self. And out of that comes Shakti, and she is therefore the creative, generative, dynamic energy and force and power out of which all creation then manifests. And therefore, Shakti is considered feminine because she is the generative principle. So if you compare the two, they need each other. There is no Shiva without Shakti. There's no Shakti without Shiva. They're actually one and the same, but they are two slightly different expressions of that oneness. Shiva would be sterile without Shakti, and Shakti would be chaos without the anchoring and centering of a Shiva.
Mm-hmm.
So Shakti is that feminine principle. Now, once Shakti comes forth, it has the duality in it as well. So the masculine and the feminine aspects are contained in that creative force. So the same creative force knows not just to create, but it also knows how to contain and how to transform, which requires destruction as well. Right? So there is a beautiful yin-yang complementarity within the Shakti force. So when we're talking about it's time as leaders to get into our Shakti and claim our true power that moves us, for us to be a whole and balanced leader with our Shakti in full flow, we need to have access the masculine elements of that Shakti and the feminine elements of that Shakti. So to give you an example, the masculine elements in leadership, as we know, are confidence, competitiveness, decisiveness. All these would be considered forces that ensue out of Shakti. Okay, as much as the complementary force to these three I just named, which would be the capacity for vulnerability, the capacity for collaboration and interconnectedness, and the capacity for openness. Right? So right there, you can see for Shakti to be whole and balanced and powerful and active, these elements need to be leveraged and to be in appropriate balance in a very unique way for each leader. And I've just named three on either side, but there's a whole lot more out there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it also, I think, shows someone that within themselves as a leader, there will be the give and take between the energies. So even if I am a woman who's a leader of a company, there might be times where I still need that Shiva or the masculine energy. There'll be that time and the place that will come forth from me, as well as being balanced by the Shakti energy or the feminine energy when that's really needed, so that it's more of a flow or a dance. It's not so much a set of leadership competencies or skills that somebody needs to deliver all the time.
Yes, and I guess the reason I have called this book Shakti Leadership and not Shiva Shakti Leadership is only because it was, easier to roll off the tongue, Shakti Leadership. And I think somewhere in leadership, it is time for the Shakti aspect to be leveraged. We all know the Shiva aspect, we all know the masculine aspect, and it's time for us to understand that if we want to effect change, we need Shakti. Shiva is no use there.
That's very powerful. Mm-hmm. So you'll be in the US, and you'll be in Chicago specifically, which is where I am. So I'm excited about that. And you're doing a couple of things when you're here. So you'll be doing a practicum or a workshop at the beginning of your time in Chicago. And then at the end of your time in Chicago, you'll be doing a talk in a very special, sacred place that we have found for you. So I'm interested to hear you share in your words at the workshop. What is it that we can really expect? What will you be doing with us? around Shakti Leadership, and then at the talk as you end your week and leave Chicago and go someplace else, what is it that you really want to be sharing with us?
So the Shakti Leadership Practicum is a much more leadership based in that sense. It's for working people who are looking to say, okay, how do I, raise my game as a leader in business? So I talk about presence. You will experience a presence practice, that kind of third state from which I can co-hold my masculine and my feminine Shakti. You will experience the Shakti flow as well. I will take you through a polarity map to understand, what are your early warning signs when you fall below the line into the excessive feminine or excessive masculine, and what can be the action steps you can take to keep you in the mature feminine and mature masculine energy of your leadership. That is very powerful. This is the work of Barry Johnson, polarity mapping, but as applied to Shakti leadership. And finally, we will also do a worksheet to understand whether you have a dominant masculine archetype in your leadership or feminine. And both are just fine. There's no right or wrong. It's about making visible to yourself what is your dominant archetype, and therefore knowing when do you want to dial up and dial down as needed for different situations. So it's like a diagnostic for yourself. It's a self-assessment. Also very, very powerful. So, and if we have time, I hope to close with some body work as well, where we will experience through movement and through body, what does the masculine energy feel like and what does that feminine energy feel like. Very powerful to embed the learning into the body. So that would be the workshop, which is about 75 minutes to 90. And then the talk at Primitive is a very, very interesting one. And since my inspiration, is so much Joseph Campbell, I am so delighted that we're going to be in a place where I can see him coming out of every object out there, because it's such deep mythological material right there in that space. It's called Primitive. And I think I'll really just go into mythology as really, brought to me by Campbell through his hero's journey and then Maureen Murdoch's heroine's journey, and really just relate to the materials there, the artifacts there, and help the audience and myself really engage with those symbols and understand what is it that they represent within each of us, and how do they relate to the drives within each of us, and what are they really trying to help us reclaim and gain. What is the Shakti they are inviting us to step into. So I think that'll be a very, very interesting, a very special, mythical, symbolic, artistic kind of session.
Wonderful. Well, we are definitely very excited to have you. I know we don't have any time left right now. We might get together for another hangout in the next couple of weeks. Is there anything that you want to make sure you say about your book, about Shakti Leadership now before we close this particular hangout?
All I can say, I'm in awe at the rate and speed, the way in which this whole book and the book tour is being received by the US and partners there, such as yourself. I just feel I have wind beneath my wings. All of us who are part of this journey seem to be held up by Shakti herself. And I'm just deeply grateful, and I'm here to enjoy the ride as much as all of you. So looking forward to this very, very joyful, beautiful, inspiring experience, which is what happens when you engage with Shakti.
Wonderful, thank you. And for anyone who is watching live, you can find the Chicago events on our website, which is www.tiaracoaching.com. You can find information on the workshop and on the talk at Primitive at tiaracoaching.com. Thank you, Nilima. And again, the book, I'll say the book title again, just in case there are people who are watching right now. It is Shakti Leadership, Embracing Masculine and Feminine Power in Business. And it's co-written by Nilima Bhat and Raj Sisodia. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Betsy.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Bye.
Bye now.